Follow along, Catholic Pilgrims, as we follow French doctor of the Church, St. Francis de Sales, through his book, Introduction to the Devout Life. Tune in as we read through this practical guide for living out the Catholic faith well. Welcome, Catholic Pilgrims. We've got a super short reading today, and we've got some more soul-searching questions. St. Francis has asked about the state of our devotion to God. He's asked about how we view ourselves. And today, he's going to ask us about our souls with regards to our neighbors. So let's turn to chapter 6 of the 5th part. Chapter 6, Examination of the Soul as Regards Our Neighbor. The Christian should love husband or wife with a calm, tranquil, firm, and constant love, chiefly because God desires and enjoins us to do so. The same reason holds good as to children and other relatives and friends, each one according to his rank. But as a general thing, what is the state of your heart with regard to your neighbor? Do you love him from your heart and for the love of God? In order to prove this, you must call to mind certain disagreeable, troublesome individuals, for with such it is that we practice the love of God towards our neighbor, and still more towards those who do us any injury either in word or deed. Try whether your heart is clear with regard to such, and whether you have to force it to love them. Are you slow to speak evil of your neighbor, especially of those whom you do not like? Do you never injure him either directly or indirectly? A very little reflection will easily satisfy you on these points. Neighbors. After this podcast is over, I'd encourage you to think about the different neighbors that you've had throughout your life. It would be a great dinner time topic. When I was 5, I had a neighbor who was an older man, and he always made me chocolate chip cookies, and I've never had a chocolate chip cookie taste like his before or since. He also had tomato plants in his yard, and he would share his tomatoes with us. Around that same time, there was a little boy who lived across the street, and he would just walk in our house. His name was Sean, and no matter how many times my parents told him that he needed to knock, he would just come right in. It's crazy to think that I wouldn't know him if he was standing in front of my face today, because I haven't seen him since I was 5. When my family first moved to the Kansas City area, we lived in a duplex, and the neighbors next door, sadly, were always fighting, and it was a bit scary. What was even weirder is that they went to our church, so we always had to pretend like we didn't know anything, which made things kind of awkward. At one of the homes that I lived in with my parents and siblings, there was an older lady across the street who hated my cats. They were outdoor cats for the most part, and they hunted and sometimes left presents on doorsteps. Some days when my mom and I left for work and school, she would hold up a dead bird and just scowl at us. She ended up poisoning one of my cats with antifreeze, which took a lot to forgive. My poor kitty died in my arms. When my husband and I were first stationed at Wright Pat, there was a family of 3 that lived around the corner from us, and they had a son who was my daughter's age. Both of them were 2 at the time. Well, the mom found out that she was pregnant, and she was really struggling with morning sickness and being super tired. And one day she accidentally fell asleep on the couch, and her son decided to take the family dog for a walk. It was a Jack Russell. Now, I was near the window of my house, and I happened to look out, and I saw Hunter just waltzing down the street, walking his dog, except he was completely nude, except for some yellow galoshes. And that was quite the sight to see. This 2-year-old little boy walking down the street with his dog with just nothing on but galoshes. So I ran outside and quickly got him home. My dad has this story of the neighbors when he was about in middle school. He was at home one evening, and my grandparents were gone to like a dance or something. And my grandparents' house, this was a house I was never in, so I don't know anything about it other than what my dad has told me, but it kind of backed up to an alleyway, and then across the street were more homes. Anyway, it was at night. My dad got in bed, and he turned and faced the wall, and all of a sudden he could hear his bedroom door open. And he knew it wasn't his brothers because they would have just like burst in the room and stuff. And he could tell that whoever it was heavy, like a heavier adult. So he figured it was the neighbor across the street, because they had problems with him before. He was a bit mentally off. So anyway, my dad said he was so frozen with fear he couldn't even move. He couldn't even turn over or anything. And he was in middle school. And he could hear him walking slowly towards my dad's bed. And my dad, like I said, he was facing the wall, so he couldn't see him, but he could hear him and he could hear his breathing. And he said he got to the edge of the bed and he just stood there. And my dad didn't move, like he could not move. And he said he stood there for such a long time that the next thing he knew, it was morning and he woke up. And I was like, how in the world did you fall asleep? And he's like, I don't know. It was just, he was standing there for so long that eventually my body just gave in and I fell asleep and he walked out. So anyway, crazy story. Totally freaked me out. That ended up leading to my grandparents moving because they were having so many problems with this neighbor. But anyway, I literally could go on and on. So many neighbors over the course of my life. And I've also heard all the stories about neighbors in my grandparents' lives and in my parents' lives. Some neighbors are good. Some neighbors are bad. I'm sure you could share loads of neighbor stories. And one of my favorite movies is The Burbs with Tom Hanks. And the whole story is about the weirdness of neighbors. I love that movie. I quote it all the time. One of the saddest things to my family when we lived in Las Vegas was the lack of community in neighborhoods. Everyone would just come home, raise up their garage door, pull their car in, and immediately shut the door down. It was made clear that everyone wanted to be left alone, but that doesn't make for a full and fulfilling life. We need communities and neighbors because they really do build the fabric of our lives. I do think social media has caused us to neglect our neighbors. People don't go out as much and interact. Kids are holed up inside playing video games ad nauseum. So they aren't making memories with neighborhood kids outside and learning how to deal with different personalities. It really is a shame. But just like last time, take St. Francis's questions to heart and ask them of yourself. Could you be doing better as a neighbor? Do you know your neighbors? Are there neighbors that you need to forgive? Are there lonely neighbors around you? These are all really good things to ask, especially because as Christians, we are called to love our neighbors. So that is all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. Be sure to join me next time. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.